Hey guys, this is Sode Sam, and I'm bringing you the second video in my tutorial series on envelopes. And today I just wanted to talk to you about the basics of how they work, some of the things that can be applied to. Envelopes are really important because they're one of the most basic building block of what you're going to be using to sculpture sounds and synthesis. Next to your filters, they're probably the most important thing. And what they basically are is changes in parameters over set periods of time. And this is usually applied to when you press keys, things of that nature. But there's just a few basic controls they're just going to take a second to go over, and here they are. This is your basic graphical representation of an envelope. You've got 4 control points. You've got an attack, a decay, a sustain, and a release. And these all work in conjunction with each other, working off of different parameters. In this case, it's going to be working on the level of our oscillator. That's one of the most common parameters it's tied to. The other would be maybe the filter frequency cutoff or of a filter. But you can apply it to a bunch of different things, like in this case you can apply it to LFOs, pitch, things of that nature. But I'm just going to stick for amplitude for this explanation just because it's the easiest to show you an example of. And we'll start with the attack control since that's the first one. You can think of the attack as whenever you press the key. So this point right here on the envelope is where your finger is pressing the key. And what happens after that is there's a rise in the parameter, and again in this case the amplitude. So when you press the key, it starts at 0 and it rises over time to get to this point, in this case 0 decibels. And so your first attack is how long it's going to take to reach that point, and in this case we'll just set it to about half a second, and I'll let you hear what that sounds like. So again, as you can hear, as soon as I press the key, the volume isn't at full strength. It slowly fades in, which gives you that nice rolling sound. And so we move on to the second 2 controls, which are your decay and sustain. And the reason I'm talking about those is because they work in conjunction with each other. And what sustain does is it actually, once it hits this point, it says, hey, I want you to move to this point now, however it's laid out. In this case, it's still at 0 decibels, so there's nowhere for it to travel, so it says, okay, cool, we'll just stay here. But if I lower it, maybe negative 8 decibels, it'll say, okay, after I hit this point, I'm going to move down to whatever this point's set to over a set period of time, which is where the decay knob comes in. It says, after I hit here, it's going to take me 1.4 seconds to reach negative 8 decibels, which is, again, this dot sustain. I'll give you a quick sound what that's like. Actually lower it a little bit just so you can hear it more. So it's going to take, after I press the key, 1 second to reach this point, then another a second and a half to reach this point. Okay, so as you can hear, after it hits here, it goes down to negative 28 where it just stays until I release the key, at which point the release takes over. And what the release is basically saying, after I release the key, which is going to be this point here, how long does it take for the control to get back down to 0, which is where the release knob comes in, and you can actually change it, increase it. I'll let you hear what it sounds like with 1.5 seconds. It's basically going to be a little tail off at the end after I release the key, so after I get up here, it'll take time for the volume to slowly fade out. Raise it up even more so you can hear it. So as you can see, whenever I release the key, the volume slowly, and in this case really slowly because we have the release set high, slowly fades back down to 0 until it's done. And those are the basic controls, attack, decay, sustain, and release. Those are the ones that you'll always see on synthesizers. These over here, initial, peak, and loop, time over velocity, keyboard tracking, you won't always see those in synthesizers, so I won't really go over those in a lot of detail. Suffice it to say, initial is the initial point of where your envelope starts, so you can actually have it start off at full volume and slowly fade out depending on how you're holding the key. Peak is where the peak is after our attack finishes, so again, you could change it here to be not necessarily full volume, but you can have it attack to negative 49 decibels and then make the decay knob move all the way up to fully released. And then loop here is actually looping the envelope over a set period of time. You could do it to milliseconds, you could set it to beats, 16 quarter, whole notes, all that good stuff. And those are your basic controls. And so now I wanted to show you some of the cool things you can do with that. I'll reset up my envelope here. And again, I said one of the coolest things you can use it for is filter cutoff frequency. And so I kind of wanted to show you that because you can get some really interesting sounds working with that. And so just using the basic controls that I just showed you, just the attack, decay, sustain, and release, you can do some really cool little tricks and sounds. Let's see. And again, you have to remember, in this case, we're not affecting the actual amplitude, we're doing the filter cutoff frequency. So if I turn the resonance up, you'll get that wah sound. And actually, I wanted to show you a trick that somebody showed me a long time ago. It's taking the envelope for filter cutoff and looping it to milliseconds. And you get some really interesting sounds here, but all your controls have to be incredibly short. But as you can see, having this envelope loop at a really fast rate gives you some really interesting waveform sounds you can use and play around with. And what's happening here is, again, this is just happening at an incredibly fast rate. I've got 1 millisecond attack and then an 8 millisecond decay. And then when I'm looping it at 11 milliseconds, it's giving me some really funky sounds. You can actually change the timbre of that sound by changing how fast it loops. So that was just one of my favorite tricks that somebody showed me a long time ago that I just wanted to share with you guys. But that's the basics of how envelopes work. And again, if you guys like what you see, be sure to subscribe. When you're putting out a lot more videos, I want to kind of cover filters next, maybe LFOs. So be sure to keep an eye out for those videos, and like and subscribe, guys, and I'll talk to you next time.